Welcome to the Anvil and Iron podcast, where we're on a mission to talk to the most innovative minds shaping the future of business. Each episode, we sit down with leaders who are forging new paths in business and beyond. The kind of people you definitely want in your network and absolutely need to know. So expect some genuine conversations, real insights, and zero of that corporate fluff. We keep it light, honest, and interesting. Well, at least that's our goal anyway, because the best ideas we think are forged through authentic connection. And the most successful leaders are often the most down-to-earth people you'll meet. Speaking of which, I've got the pleasure of having Robert Kazmi on the Anvil and Iron Show. Robert is the Chief Revenue Officer at Koombia. Hey, Robert, thanks for being on our show. There's only one you in the world. Tell us a little bit about you.
Hey Joe, thanks for having me. Great to be chatting with you again. My background is in economics and computer science, and I've spent the last over 2 decades at this point in the technology, specifically in the software industry. I'm passionate about and deeply fascinated by the intersection of physics. Um, Economics and automation tools, um, and how you kind of bring those to bear in order to disrupt the good old 80/20 model in sales.
Love it. Hey, most leaders I'm talking to often find that the 80/20 rule is alive and well, unfortunately, in their in their organization. As a matter of fact, one of the things I purpose to do is to help reduce, flip those numbers off the 80/20 and get it a whole lot more towards the good than the bad. So, hey, so where are you sitting? Where are you sitting today? Where's your home office?
Well, I'm in the Metro Washington, D.C. area on the Virginia side.
Gotcha. You're on the
Yeah,
Virginia side. I used to be over in the Baltimore side. Worked in Alexandria and in Tyson's Corner. Actually, worked in the Tidy Bowl building. You know exactly what I mean when I say that, don't you?
that's right.
Yeah. So, I was there for nearly three years. Can you tell us what shaped your career journey and how that region really has influenced your path to becoming the CRO at Kumbia?
Sure. So, I've had a blend of product companies, more traditional on-prem type applications, as well as SaaS applications, more recently over the last 15 years or so, as well as services. And in some companies, it's been a blend of both products and services. In my background, I've had the opportunity to work across multiple continents and geographical regions, including APAC, of course, here in the Americas, in LATAM, and in parts of Asia, including South Asia. Um, this area in particular is unique because there's a lot of GovTech. The challenge is you have one customer. The beauty of the model is you have one customer, but that creates a very unique blend of circumstances, especially if you're dealing, for instance, with DoD. You've got to really understand the power base and how decisions are made and how they're driven. Over the years, I've personally tended to focus less on government and GovTech and focus more on commercial software applications and services applications. So even though I am in this area, my focus and my growth focus has been on more on commercial.
Gotcha. So, in an article just about a year ago, you mentioned that Kumbia reached 200 team members back in 2024. What kind of strategic pillars really drove that growth, and how did you manage to scale while preserving the culture that you're proud of? And tell us a little bit about that culture,
Yeah, yeah. I think I'd like to start with the culture first.
please.
The culture is a very important driver of our success. Um, we run a very flat organization, and a lot of companies aspire to run flat organizations. We truly live and breathe that philosophy. We have a open door philosophy at Kumbia. which means anybody can raise an issue about anything, even outside of their typical workday, so to speak. And it encourages dialogue, and it encourages creative thinking and problem solving, most importantly, from a variety of different angles, things that sometimes you might not think of. And that's typically what it leads to is opportunity identification, right? So, we, like a lot of companies, went from a physical location, kind of centralized, a back office development operations in Barranquilla, in Colombia, which is on the Caribbean coast of Colombia, to becoming a company that's spread across 17 different countries
Wow.
and headquartered in Slack, like a lot of other businesses, right? So
Is
it,
that
it
is that a new
became
mail? Is that a new mailing address? I wonder. Like,
that's pretty much the new mailing address, yes, and I think we're not alone in that, right? Um, but what it also meant was we had to do things differently in order to keep the culture and the cultural exchange alive, because what we are tasked to do by our customers is help them solve some very complex problems. And you cannot solve complex problems by only looking at it from one angle. Typically, you've got to have a diversity of thought and a diversity of experiences around the table to be able to understand how to solve those problems in the most efficient way. And the most efficient way, both in terms of timeliness, but also in terms of cost for the customer. So, in order to keep the cultural flag flying, we do a variety of in-person and virtual meetups for the organization, for the team members. And it's not as easy as before, where you could walk across to somebody's desk and have a conversation. So, now that we've got people in 17 different countries, how do we get them to communicate and collaborate effectively? And we've put some new HR programs into place that help facilitate that, skip level meetings and other social events that help foster that kind of communication and collaboration, kind of water cooler talk, but virtually, if that makes sense.
very cool. I love it. Um, what kind of strategic? Oh, I'm curious. Actually, want to back up one step. Do you have any guidelines that are either known or maybe just understood when somebody brings a challenge to you at Kumbia? Are there any kind of set of guidelines? I have one for myself, but or what I want to see, when somebody has an issue. How do you all navigate that and keep it so that people can give you honest feedback without any fear of, we all know the fear, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. We are constantly reinforcing the fact with our team members that they should over communicate, and both internally as well as with customers, and raise the issue flag sooner rather than later. And that could lead to some false flags, but there's no penalty in doing that, right? So, we've created a culture of collaboration and communication. And I hope, as a result of doing that, reduce the fear factor of somebody raising a false flag on an issue, because it's a lot better to over communicate and say, no, that really isn't an issue, and here's why, as opposed to, here's a little niggling thing that can snowball into a large issue that becomes potentially debilitating to the customer's progress or to the relationship. So we don't have a rule per se. What we do as part of the delivery methodology is, obviously there are ceremonial steps within the process that you'd expect any good company to follow. But outside of that, there are no rules for engagement internally as it relates to raising an issue. In fact, what we encourage is free flowing of ideas and a free flowing of communication. So within Slack, we would set up channels for each project, and there are different types of channels. And one of them, for instance, is a escalation channel. And there are key people, including executives of the company, that are part of the escalation channel, so we can all monitor kind of what's going on and help the team solve it before it becomes an executive issue. That's really the goal is, how do we contain something that could become an issue based on our experience or based on the interactions we're having with the customer?
Very good. I had a boss back in golly days, back in the Alexandria, Virginia days, as a matter of fact, in the 1900s. And he used to say, Joe, good news should travel fast. Bad news should travel faster.
Yeah.
And then one of the things I learned really fast, really early on, is that don't just come with a problem. Always at least have one potential solution, right? If we need to know about problems, but we also want to hear, I don't want to just hear about problems just for problem's sake. So um, I want to get a little bit more into Kumbia and what it is that you actually do. So I like to frame this, kind of like if you were explaining this to a fifth or a sixth grader, what Kumbia does, how would you do that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, we develop AI-powered mobile and web apps for companies that are looking at really complex use cases. So typically, a customer would not come to us and ask us to build a simplistic website or a very simple application, mobile application, as an example. They would come to us and say, we're looking for help to build a two-sided marketplace that requires HIPAA compliance, that has SOC 2, that has PCI. So these are very complex, heavily, regulated use cases. There are kind of on the design side, there's a simplistic view. The UX piece is fairly simplistic because you've got, how the user perceives colors and iconography, and then you've got. I'm sorry, go.
Iconography,
Yeah,
Okay, that means like the little images that we have immediate kind of perception of what that image is referring to. Got it. Got it.
correct. Yes, we've become accustomed to through repetitive use, through habitual dependence on certain icons meaning certain things. For instance, the hamburger menu, the arrows, the email sign, all of those things, the Twitter logo and so on. So we instantly know what those things are. We know to recognize them. And then the kind of the color schemes talk about and really convey a sense of emotion or passion or seriousness, and kind of plays into the theme. But the most important aspect, arguably, is UX, the user experience side of things, and that's where Kumbia, we've invested heavily over several years, is training our designers on the UX piece, because how you capture a customer, how you onboard them, how you build habitual dependence, which leads to virality, is critically important to the success of the customer's application. That's both a web, based desktop application or a mobile application. Because if you think about it, you on the one hand, you're playing for the attention economy with a mobile app. Yeah, that's the typical use case. But on an enterprise app, and if it's web driven, you still need people to be able to easily understand the output that the company wants from them. And in order to do that, what are the inputs that the user has to give? And the UX is really what helps simplify and drive that.
Interesting. Yes, I got a perfect example of that, and I experience it almost every single day. One of the banks that I use has a mobile app, obviously. I mean, and that every time I log in, it asks me for it. It wants to text me a code or what have you. Well, because I'm older and I don't always use my glasses, I have my font set pretty large. Well, every single time I go to do that, the number one word I see is resend. And for the longest time, I was like, well, why is this not working? Why am I having to resend? That wasn't it. That was actually kind of supposed to be further down the screen. There was a place, and it just really wasn't thoughtfully made. And it's frustrating. And I actually wanted to call the bank about that. But you know what? Truthfully, I almost would leave the bank because of that app issue if I didn't figure out that it was It was frustrating me. So yeah, I mean, you have a really good point. The user experience is so important. So yeah, that's really
And
cool.
because of our focus on, the whole user experience, over the last 5, 6 years, we've in total won dozens of design awards for our customers and for some of our own applications that we've developed internally, international design awards that recognize the not just the creative side, but the functionality and how it draws the user in and keeps habitual dependence and helps promote virality.
Interesting, because I was going to ask you about that. You all just won the Indigo Design Award in 2025, right?
That's right. And in 24 and in 23 and yes.
Gotcha. I just try to stay on the leading edge of information here, So what does that recognition reflect about the company's creative direction, and how does it bolster your value to clients? Like how do potential clients see that as something that is important, when they are trying to decide whether to engage you for their for your services or not?
Yeah. So user experience design is a big part of any application today, whether it's in the mobile form factor, in the um, um, iPad type form factor, or on the desktop form factor, because there's so much information out there. There's an overload of data points, both in terms of what you can input as well as in terms of what you can output. So user experience design is one of those really scientific areas, as I was saying before, that, we focus on to simplify so that the right input ultimately produces the right output, meaning the outcome first. So we understand the outcome that the customer wants and work backward from there. It's less about how a designer perceives it, because if you leave it to the creative minds, they could seemingly take it off track. This could become a different type of application versus what is the business outcome you want, and then what's the best way of achieving that business outcome with all the relevant data points that you need.
So along with that, I realized that you all have been integrating your AI across your services. So from AI assisted development to machine learning and product ideation, how has AI reshaped your business model and service delivery?
Yeah, it's a good question. There are several areas of impact. There are areas that we use AI today for things like automation testing, right? You use AI for certain types of development activities. You use AI for certain types of validation activities, reading and validating code. What all of this AI integration is enabling us to do is it's enabling us to uh, have our senior developers become more valuable as part of the process. Not less valuable, but more valuable, because AI produces a lot, but it isn't always understanding how it links. The context part is missing, and it isn't always accurate.
Right.
Um, right.
Very, very
So
true.
as a result, what we're able to do is, we're able to use our human technologists as kind of auditors. In addition to being part of the process, they also audit the whole process. The deliverable to the customer as a result is much, much higher quality, much faster, which means not only savings today because of the speed, but because of the quality, it means less technical debt, which means better savings in the long run.
Interesting, interesting. So how about on the sales side of the house? How are you incorporating AI in that area?
So, I've never really seen the 80/20 rule as a law per se, but more as a challenge, as something to go after and break. So, combining, kind of a physics mindset, um, and uh, how do you reduce, for instance, friction in the pipeline, right? How do you get to that pathway faster? Um, Value doesn't just pool at the top. 20%, values throughout the chain. Like, how do you unlock it? Um, from an economic standpoint, what are the inefficiencies that we have? The actual cash related inefficiencies. How do we use cash? How do we use money as a force multiplier? And the same thing with technology. How do we bring AI and process software and use those as force multipliers in the process so that a lot of the mundane things you're using technology to do as opposed to highly valued, highly skilled individuals to do. So, we've been on this journey. I've been on this journey over 15 years at this point. But, specifically at Koombia, the last 3 years or so, we've kind of accelerated with all the AI models that have become available. And there's some really good point solutions as well that we've integrated into our overall framework. And, as a result, what we're able to do is um, we're able to reduce the overall friction within the sales motion. And consequently, we're able to drive higher value engagements. And higher value, yes, it does mean the closed ones or the closed win deals, but it also means for a services company like us to know what to qualify out of, because there's a big difference between good revenue and bad revenue. Not all customers are equal, not all opportunities are equal. So how do you qualify out of the bad revenue ones? And we've kind of layered into a multi-pronged approach and process, which includes sales qualification. So we go through BANT and MEDIC on the sales side, and then we've got a uh, pretty detailed uh, and um involved uh, risk uh, process or risk mitigation process on the technical side. So when we look at an opportunity, we're not only looking at it from the perspective of, is this good revenue, but what's the long tail aspect of this, right? Which is what is often missed. And because we're able to qualify the technical risk, we're able to enable our customers to make better decisions as well. We enable them by giving them upfront all the information that they need to understand the technical risk or the business risk. And we focus really more on the technical risk for our customers to understand what is the technology solution that they're really building. And this is especially important for startups because startups tend to pivot a lot more. They'll pivot. There's data out there that suggests that they'll pivot, 6 to 24 times in the first year on the core business model itself. And so what we're doing is we're giving them the data as much as we can with the information they give us to help them make that decision so that they know what to be prepared for.
Very interesting. So with AI continuing to evolve, with co-pilots, generative models, AI agents, embedded intelligence, what do you have your eyes set on, in 2026 and beyond that you haven't quite jumped into yet to improve the results, for your team and or the company as a whole?
Yeah, so there's we are kind of looking at this from broadly two perspectives. One is, what tools and technologies and techniques do we need to continue to evolve and improve upon internally? And that's a constant process. And then the second is, what enablement tools do we give to our customers so that they can help us help them more effectively? Because in a scenario and in a business model like ours, it's critical for us to understand the customer requirements. Not uh, given unlimited time and money, we could build anything for anybody, but nobody's got unlimited time or money. So there's always the race against, the clock. And the iron triangle of software decision making is uh, obviously cost, price, and quality. And almost always, you're compromising on one of those three parameters. So quality is non-negotiable. Everybody wants the highest quality, and we want to deliver the highest quality. Price and then timeline, which are attached to features, is kind of where the rub typically is. So one of the things that, we are looking at very, very closely, and we've already started to do some internal pilots on this, is how do we get the velocity from a physics standpoint close enough that we can deliver on both? Is that possible to do? And if so, how do we do it? And there are, tools out there today. You named, Copilot, that's one avenue, but there are other new frameworks, that are coming online directly from OpenAI. XAI is kind of thrown the hat in the ring as well, as has, um, Claude and some of the other companies, and there are tools now that you can generate at a much high velocity and a high degree of accuracy backlogs. And part of the challenge has been traditionally, is the backlog accurate? Is it detailed enough? Because that's what the designers use to develop the blueprint, that the developers use as a blueprint to do development. So it starts with kind of the backlog aspect of it. Have the requirements been captured effectively and efficiently enough? And what's interesting is this whole transformation that's going into the ideas economy. And, we think that there's new opportunities for us to go even with in the enterprise space and enable them to do uh, risk mitigated, risk contained experiments, product experiments, with a fraction of the capital investment that they would have had, let's say, 3 or 5 years ago.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. So when you talk about tools and tech internally and then enablement tools, for your customers, are you like when you talking about enablement tools for the customers? Are you talking pre-engagement or post-engagement? Like as they're evaluating Koombia and the tools that you may develop for them, where you're in the discovery process. Is that what you're talking about, or as part of your tech stack implementation for them?
So the implementation part is, what's been has been in play for the last, 2.5, 3 years, and continues to grow. Anthropic and Copilot and so on. They've got solution stacks for that. Um, so we think that that part is not perfect, but it's kind of evolving. There's a pathway. We see the pathway. The part that we're interested in really helping pioneer is on the um, evaluation, the pre-sale side of things, because there really isn't a tool like that out there today. And we see that as a potential opportunity.
Yeah, anything time you can be on the forefront of something like that, that can be a real differentiator. And like I said, there's really only about four things that an organization is going to evaluate. That's cost, it's really the whole price performance cost variable, right? And then the quality, and then and then the timeline. So interesting. All right, so let me ask you this: if you had unlimited payroll, Robert, you could get 20, 30 recent college grads, throw in a couple MBAs as well, and you can put them in a room, and I mean you just have them work for 10 hours a day. What would you want them to work on? What would you want them to solve? What would you want them to investigate? What would I know you didn't see this question coming, so I just want to give you a moment to think about it.
Yes,
Sports
well,
brainiac,
look, as a
young
thought
brainiac.
exercise, if we were throwing bodies at it because we had recent college grads or perhaps even interns available to help with some kind of research, there are areas that we would use their skills for and their resource for on the research front. But I've never been. Somebody that's built a business, and I've built a few, going from zero to a couple $100 million, and done a couple of big turnarounds, going from $4 to $81 million, and so on. For me, it's always been about applying, those universal laws of physics kind of intersecting technology and automation. How do you capture energy? How do you improve flow? How do you excite inertia? How do you bring about leverage? How do you, cultivate and develop efficiency within the system? Because business is always replicating something. And if it's not success, it's inefficiencies because if you don't have the right systems and processes in place, and it's not all about systems and processes, you can't not get to that scale factor. Brute force goes only so far and no more. So, if it was a research type project, yeah, there are things that, we would have them look at specifically related to technology trends and so on, but it doesn't mean that, they would automatically become SDRs, for instance. Having 20 SDRs all of a sudden uh, would not guarantee any level of success the way things are running today. Today, you have to really understand, unlike before, and I can tell you about early on in my career where the old adage of number of dials produced number of meetings, produced, demos, produced proposals, produced closed deals, no longer valid. It's
Right.
the same reason why I wouldn't hire somebody just because they've been in the industry for a certain period of time or because they've done business with certain customers. Those relationships don't carry forward any longer. They haven't really since 2008 because of how businesses are making decisions. There's a lot of death by committee, especially in enterprises. That sales cycle has become a purchasing cycle in a lot of cases. So the focus with these people, if I was to bring them in, would be enablement, enabling customers to do their research ahead of time.
Gotcha. It almost sounds like you ever heard of Six Sense marketing?
Yes.
Yeah. Am I right? You just took a page out of that.
Not necessarily, but yes,
No?
there are lots of models that, are very similar. There's also spin selling,
Well,
if
yeah,
you're familiar with that,
of course.
So yes, there's a lot of models that are very familiar with that. Yeah.
Right. But getting the intent and providing your potential customers with the ability to research and think differently about the solutions that you offer, which that would then, give them the opportunity to raise their hand, right? That's better than a bunch of smilers and dialers for sure. We were talking in our first call when we were kicking some things around about the 80/20 rule. I'd love your perspective on that and what that means to the organization, how it impacts what you do and how you're doing things differently at Kumbia.
Sure. Yeah. Joe, traditionally, people, lean into the 80/20 rule is, 20% of their customers producing 80% of their revenue, 20% of their employees producing 80% of their results, and so on. Um, what I've tended to do in my career is kind of look at that differently. I've taken that more as a challenge, as a model to disrupt and make better, rather than the rule, which I know a lot of people prescribe to. So for instance, you look at the physics aspect of flow, right? Um, Value doesn't just pool in one pipe. It comes from across the network. It comes from your entire variety of customers. If you can apply tools and techniques to unlocking revenue, look at velocity, you start to develop this view of long tail. And, where will the revenue come from? Not just this year, how good bookings look or revenue looks this year, but what does this mean for the next 2, 3, 4 years? Which is, it needs more predictability. Can you look out 18, 24 months? From an economic standpoint, it's not just a distribution of faith, for example. It's about how do you get inefficiencies corrected in the system? Um, if you can again use automation and people processes that are not overly complicated or burdensome, but that can help develop efficiencies of scale, you can look at flattening the curve. You can look at how accounts are contributing to more growth with less sales time. And then, you look at the scale factor in terms of human time. How much energy is it taking? What's the output going to be per person? Do you just take SDRs, for instance, and throw them at the customer qualification or the opportunity qualification? Or is there a better model expanding our ability with high touch opportunities, converting those to low touch because we've automated a lot of the other processes, which means that the conversations you have start to become more valuable. You're not just following up as we did in the past for updates. You're following up for for something that's really substantial, where we're having meaningful conversations to move the opportunities along. So using kind of the concept of, let's say, physics to understand flow, the economics mindset of how do you reframe distribution, and using automation and AI tools for scale and execution, you kind of change the 80/20 rule, the model, to one that's certainly giving you a lot more efficiency and a lot more scale.
I know we're running short on time, but I wanted to ask you, can you give me an example of how you or one of your sales folks has had a use case where they were absolutely certain that what you have to offer is of significant value to the prospective customer or client, but the customer or client just wasn't seeing it, or maybe not taking the time to get all the information? Can you think of a way you've been able to break through that?
Yeah. So you ask a really good question, and there's two kind of uh, philosophical different views over here. So one is kind of the get found way of doing business, and the other is find. In the find model, where you're going out and mining these opportunities, it does become inherently more challenging, and you're selling rather than solving. In the get found model, which is the model that I prescribe to, and what I described in terms of the disruption to the 80/20 rule, uh, basically you're engaging a prospect much lower down the intent funnel. So they're much higher intent. And in doing that, the conversations start to become uh, they become more solution oriented and problem solving. So we're doing less selling, we're doing more qualification, if that makes sense. So what we do is everything from how we identify opportunities to how we qualify the risk, the business risk as well as the technical risk, is a lot more intricate. So for instance, if a customer or a prospect hits our website, based on either our known identification of that prospect. Say they're an enterprise customer and they're a bank. We might know who they are based on them hitting our website, or we might not. And if we don't, based on the information they're looking at, we score them. And we start to change the information that they're looking at on our website and make it relevant and specific to them, to their business, and to their use cases. This is technology we have running on our site today. So what that means is there's a lot more relevancy in the conversation that's being had. And when there's more relevancy, people can relate to it. The relatability factor becomes a lot more specific to their needs. And consequently, the conversation again, changes from selling to uh, problem solving and providing solutions. Doesn't mean that everybody's a good fit for us. There's still times when we qualify out because technically or business wise, it's not the right thing for us to pursue. It may not be a profitable long-term opportunity for us. But in doing what we do, it brings for instance, the close rates that we have are historically high for the industry. We're over 30%. We're between 30 and 40% in terms of close rates.
Interesting, interesting. I love it. Hey, spoken like a true I would say marketing and sales ninja. Kind of rounding out here. Got a couple quick lightning round type questions. Okay, if you had a superpower, what would you want it to be?
If I had a superpower,
Yeah,
the ability to bend time.
bend time. Oh wow. Okay. All right. And then, hey, when you're not working, what is it that you like to do? It was on your LinkedIn profile, pretty deep. I can't quite recall what it was that you said. Tell me, what do you like to do for fun?
But look, there's a lot of things I'm passionate about, and I like kind of collecting and spending time on. But I will tell you the thing that's become the most near and dear to my heart is family. And I know that sounds like a cliche, but
It's
your
not.
kids grow up and you've programmed your life around sports activities and school activities, and you're juggling work travel and work priorities and weekend shopping trips and everything around, but your kids are always central, and then they up and leave one day, and you're sitting wondering, where did that 18, 20 years go? So if I could have some of that time back, I would love that.
Okay, what's the age range of your kids?
My daughter's 29, my son is 23.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I'm not quite far along on the 29, but my oldest are a little older than your youngest, and then we have one that's 20, still in college. So yeah, I've been there with you, and I'm still doing it. So
Yeah,
hey, you know what the big trick is now, and I'm sure you and your wife know this, is that figure out ways to entice them to want to keep coming back. Keep
that's right.
my wife says, keep the welcome mat out and your mouth shut. And the mouth shut part is really, really difficult for me. So,
Yeah.
yeah, bending time with family, awesome. Okay, so hey, really appreciate you being on the show today. Thank you for the time. I got to do a little shameless self plug here at Sales Acceleration. We work with organizations that that want to increase the revenue number, and sometimes they want to do that and reduce their cost of sales. So we at the Amble and Iron Project, we look for ways to make AI work for that equation and basically solve any problems that you're looking to solve. So thanks so much for joining us on the Amble and Iron Show. I really appreciate your time. And I have one more plug, but it isn't selfless, and it's specifically. I mean, the other one was just for listeners, but for you, Robert, and your organization, one of my projects that I'm very passionate about is I have a relationship with an organization out of Zacapa, Guatemala. So I don't know if you have any folks in Guatemala, but I'm sure you do have them in Latin America. And what happens what is available in Zacapa is an organization called Hope of Life International has a conference center that is built there for organizations to bring their teams down. They have a four-story building that every room in that building is a suite, has its own bathroom, has its own air conditioning, and then they have a 25-person boardroom that on the top floor where you can have your executive, your meetings, do team building, and give your team the opportunity to serve together. So anybody that ever wants to know about that, just contact me at Joe at salesx-ai.com or jknotts at salesacceleration.com. We'd love to get you more information about Hope of Life's meetings on missions. Come check us out. Thanks for being on the show today. Really appreciate you, Robert.
Thank you, Joe. Likewise, thank you for having me.
My
Take
pleasure.
care.
Oh, don't
Bye.
hang up until you're at 100%. So let me do one thing. I'm going to hit stop.